When I pulled the silver ribbon from the box that night, I didn't expect to unravel my entire marriage with it. It was supposed to be a perfect Christmas Eve, the first one in our new home, the one I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl watching snow fall through my grandmother's window. But instead of wrapping love around our family tree, I found something else, cold, folded, and final. Divorce papers. They were tucked neatly under the string of fairy lights in Daniel's drawer, like a secret waiting for me to discover it. His signature was already there. The date was last week. I remember just standing there, holding that stack of paper as if it were burning through my hands. My kids were asleep upstairs. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. And my husband, the man I'd loved for 12 years, was out on the porch, pretending to talk to his brother on the phone. That was the moment I realized that not every Christmas miracle comes wrapped in gold. Some arrive in silence, and tear everything you've built apart. A week before that night, my world had still felt steady. I was that kind of mom, the one who planned everything 2 months in advance. I had Pinterest boards full of cookie recipes, a color-coded shopping list, and a handwritten schedule taped to the fridge. This year was special. It was our first big family Christmas in the new house, a wide, warm space with a fireplace that crackled like laughter. I'd invited both sides of the family, my in-laws, my sister, Daniel's cousins. I wanted the house to be filled with voices and music and the smell of roasted turkey. Daniel had seemed distant, but I told myself it was work stress. He ran a small construction firm, and December was always his budget chaos month. Sometimes he'd come home late, still smelling of dust and diesel, kiss me on the forehead, and say, "Don't wait up, Em." And I didn't. Because trust, that's what our marriage was built on. Or so I thought. That Monday, I spent the morning with my daughter, Sophie, baking gingerbread cookies. She's 8, curious, wide-eyed, still believing that Santa can fix anything. My son, Liam, is 10 and more practical. He was upstairs playing video games, occasionally yelling at his friends through the headset. The kitchen looked like a flower storm had hit it. Sophie was dusted head to toe in sugar. "Daddy's gonna love these," she said, smiling, and I laughed, because I believed her. I believed that somewhere inside Daniel was still the man who used to slow dance with me in the kitchen when no one was watching. That evening, I set up the Christmas boxes. I'd been saving new ornaments all year, small glass hearts, wooden angels, a little house ornament that said, "Our first home." Daniel helped me carry the boxes in from the garage. He didn't say much, just handed me a box and walked off to check something on his phone. His eyes flicked toward the door like he was waiting for a message. I noticed. I always notice. But I chose silence, like so many wives do. That night, I decorated the tree alone. I didn't mind, I told myself it was peaceful. I turned on the old Christmas record player and poured a glass of wine. The lights shimmered softly, reflecting off the window, and for a brief second, I felt proud. This was the home I'd wanted. The life I'd fought for. When Daniel came in, he barely looked up. "Looks nice," he said, then disappeared into the bedroom. A tiny sting of disappointment pricked at me, but I let it fade. Because Christmas, I told myself, wasn't about perfection. It was about love. If only I'd known that love had already left the room. The next few days passed in a blur of errands and laughter. I hosted cookie swaps, wrapped presents late into the night, even sneaked little notes into the kids' stockings. Daniel was polite, distant, and almost too calm. On Thursday night, he told me his parents might arrive a day late. "Mom's not feeling great," he said, staring at the TV. "They might skip Christmas this year." It didn't sound right. His mother had been texting me about her famous trifle recipe just that morning. But again, I let it go. Because the holidays make us tired, anxious, overthinking. Then, Friday evening, as I was folding laundry, I heard his phone buzz in the next room. He'd left it face down on the couch. And for a split second, just a heartbeat, I thought about picking it up. I didn't. Instead, I folded his shirt, smoothed it, and told myself that good wives trust their husbands. But that little sound, the buzz, the faint vibration against the sofa, stayed in my ears long after the laundry was done. The morning of Christmas Eve arrived like a postcard, soft sunlight, the sound of carols on the radio, snowflakes brushing against the window. Sophie ran around in her reindeer pajamas, begging me to let her open just one gift. Daniel was quiet, sipping his coffee. When I leaned in to kiss his cheek, he pulled away just slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for my heart to feel it. He went upstairs soon after, saying he needed to finish some paperwork. And that's when it happened. That's when I went to look for the silver ribbon I'd been saving, the one I wanted to tie around his gift. I opened his drawer, expecting to find wrapping paper, maybe his cologne. But instead, I found the papers. 8 pages. Legal, sterile, final. My name typed neatly across the top. His signature at the bottom. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My throat tightened. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the fairy lights from the hallway glinting across the glossy white paper. The silence was deafening. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, my life had just stopped. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been 5 minutes or an hour. The papers lay open on my lap, my reflection trembling in the shiny print. My mind went blank first, then flooded, all at once. Every moment from the last few months began rearranging itself in my head, like puzzle pieces suddenly finding their fit. The late nights at the office. The new password on his phone. The way he'd stopped reaching for my hand when we crossed the street. At that moment, it wasn't rage that filled me, it was grief. Quiet, heavy grief. The kind that settles in your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I folded the papers back neatly, just the way I'd found them, and closed the drawer. But I couldn't unsee the name printed across the top, Daniel R. Thompson, bold, certain, detached. He had already signed them. He had already decided. And I was the last to know. I walked downstairs, the smell of sugar cookies still hanging in the air. The twinkling lights on the Christmas tree blurred through my tears. It was all too perfect, the stockings, the glittering star, the wrapped presents with names in my handwriting. It felt like the house was mocking me. I heard the door creak. Daniel came in from the porch, brushing off snow from his jacket. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, casually, like nothing was wrong. For a moment, I almost answered. Almost pretended. But the words stayed stuck behind my teeth. I just nodded. "Yeah. Fine." He walked past me to the kitchen, poured himself coffee, humming a tune under his breath. And I stood there, watching him, the man I'd built a life with, as if he were a stranger wearing my husband's face. That day moved slowly, like walking through water. I kept myself busy, cleaning, baking, wrapping gifts, because if I stopped, I knew I'd fall apart. In the afternoon, Sophie and Liam helped me hang the last ornaments. Daniel sat by the fireplace scrolling through his phone, occasionally smiling at something on the screen. At one point, Liam asked, "Dad, can we build a snowman later?" Daniel didn't even look up. "Maybe tomorrow, bud. I've got some things to finish first." Tomorrow. There wouldn't be a tomorrow for us, not the kind I'd imagined. I looked at him then, really looked, at the faint line between his brows, the distant glaze in his eyes. He wasn't here. Not really. His body was in this house, but his mind was already gone. After dinner, while the kids watched Home Alone, I went upstairs again. My hands were trembling, but I needed to be sure. I searched the drawer again, this time slower, more deliberate. Behind the papers was a small black notebook. It looked new, leather-bound, expensive. Inside were scribbled notes in his handwriting: lawyer meeting, December 10th, finalize settlement options, custody schedule, alternate holidays. My heart cracked open. He'd already planned Christmas without me in it. And there, at the bottom of one page, was a name: Laura, talk after New Year's. The ink was smudged slightly, like it had been written in haste. Laura. I knew that name. She worked in his office. She was his new assistant, friendly, polite, maybe a few years younger than me. The kind of woman who laughed easily and wore confidence like perfume. My stomach turned cold. I closed the notebook, sat there in the dark, and tried to swallow the truth, but it was too big to go down. Later that night, I watched Daniel from the hallway. He was sitting in the living room, the tree lights dancing on his face. He looked peaceful. I wondered if guilt ever kept him awake. When he finally came upstairs, he didn't notice me pretending to be asleep. I felt the mattress shift, heard the faint sound of him unlocking his phone, typing something fast. Then silence. I waited until his breathing slowed. Then I slipped out of bed and quietly stepped onto the porch. The cold hit my skin like glass. The snow was thick and white, covering the world in silence. I stood there for a while, staring at the twinkling houses across the street, wondering how many of those warm, happy homes were built on secrets too. At midnight, I made a decision. Not to confront him right away, but to watch. To see how far he'd go before telling me himself. I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and scrolled through his messages. The password wasn't hard to guess, his old truck's number plate. He hadn't even bothered to change it. And there it was. Laura. Hundreds of messages. Some work-related. Others not. The last one, sent that very morning. Can't wait for next year. Fresh start. No more hiding. Her reply. I'll bring the champagne. My whole body went numb. The house was still except for the ticking clock in the kitchen. I stood there, reading those words over and over until my vision blurred. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake him and throw every ornament in the house at him. But instead, I just sat down on the floor beside the tree I'd decorated with love, the one I'd built to symbolize our family, and cried quietly. Each light seemed to mock me now, blinking in slow, cruel rhythm. In the silence of that night, between the smell of pine and betrayal, I made another promise to myself. This would be the last Christmas he'd ever break me. Tomorrow, I'd confront him. Not in anger, but in truth. The clock struck midnight. Outside, snow fell thick and soundless, layering the world in quiet perfection, as if even the night wanted to keep my pain secret. But inside, my chest was pounding like thunder. I stood there in front of the Christmas tree, watching the blinking lights dance over the divorce papers I had laid carefully beneath it. I had placed them there, right where he would see them first thing in the morning, under the star, beside the gifts. It was poetic, in a cruel way. He had hidden our ending in a drawer, so I decided to bring it out into the light. The irony made me almost smile. Almost. I heard his footsteps upstairs, the creak of floorboards, the low hum of his voice as he spoke softly into his phone. I waited until I heard the words, "Good night, Laura." Then I spoke from the bottom of the stairs, my voice steady, clear. "Daniel." He froze. His head turned toward me, his phone still in his hand. "Who were you saying goodnight to?" I asked. His expression flickered, just for a second. Then came the practiced calm. "Work call. Laura had some end-of-year reports." "Laura," I repeated, the name rolling bitterly off my tongue. "You mean the woman you're starting your fresh start with?" He blinked. "What?" I took a step closer, my voice low but certain. "Don't lie to me, Daniel. I read the messages. I saw the papers." His face went pale. For a moment, he looked like a man stripped bare, caught between fear and shame. Then, just as quickly, his expression hardened. "You went through my things?" That line, almost made me laugh. "You planned our divorce behind my back," I said, my voice trembling. "You planned my children's custody. You planned Christmas without me. And you're upset that I looked in a drawer?" He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. "Tell me, Daniel," I continued. Did you sign those papers before or after we hung the stockings together? Before or after you told Sophie that Santa would bring her a bike? Did you look at me this week, even once, and feel anything? He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. It's not that simple, Mary. Then make it simple for me. He stopped pacing, finally meeting my eyes. I haven't loved you for a long time. The air went out of me. Even though I'd expected it, hearing it aloud hit like ice water. He went on. We've been going through the motions, you and I. The house, the kids, the dinners, it's all routine. You deserve someone who actually wants this life. I don't. And Laura does? I asked quietly. He looked away. That was my answer. The tree lights flickered across his face, and for a moment, I saw the boy I used to know, the man who'd proposed under a snowfall, who'd built this very house with his hands, who'd cried when Sophie was born. But that man was gone. Now he was someone else, a stranger rehearsing his freedom while I still held the script of our life. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Why wait until Christmas? He sighed, rubbing his temples. Because I didn't want to ruin it for the kids. I was going to tell you after the holidays. I let out a short, hollow laugh. So instead, you just let me decorate, cook, invite your parents, and smile through the season, while you planned your exit? I didn't want a scene, he muttered. Well, congratulations, I said. You just got one. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock and the whisper of snow against the windows. Then he said quietly, I'll move out after New Year's. You can keep the house. It was meant to sound generous, but it only deepened the wound. Keep the house, I echoed. Like it's a souvenir. He exhaled, defeated. Mary, please. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Of course not, I said, my voice breaking. You wanted to unwrap your freedom after Christmas. What a thoughtful gift. I turned away before he could answer. My hands were shaking, but my decision had already been made hours ago. You don't have to move out, I said softly. We do. He frowned. What? I'll take Sophie and Liam to my sister's. You can have your clean slate, your empty house, your shiny new year. He didn't stop me. He just stood there, staring at the papers under the tree, the same way I had earlier, like they were some foreign object he couldn't quite believe existed. I packed that night while he sat in silence downstairs. Sophie's pajamas. Liam's stuffed bear. The stockings we'd hung. With their names stitched in red thread. When I reached for my coat, I paused, my reflection in the mirror looked strange. Pale, hollow-eyed, but calm. For the first time in months, my heartbeat felt steady. It was done. At dawn, I carried the kids to the car, still half asleep. The sky was gray and heavy with snow. Daniel didn't come out to say goodbye. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced back once, at the window, at the twinkling tree that still glowed behind the glass. Our last Christmas. The one I would never forget. The drive to my sister's house was 3 hours long, but it felt like a lifetime. Sophie and Liam slept most of the way, their small heads resting against each other in the back seat. The radio played soft carols, songs that used to make me feel warm, but that morning, each note cut through me like a shard of glass. Snow flurried against the windshield, and I kept both hands tight on the wheel. I wasn't running away, I told myself. I was leaving to survive. When I finally pulled into my sister's driveway, she was already waiting at the door in her robe, coffee mug in hand. She took one look at my face and didn't ask a single question. She just opened her arms. I broke. For the first time since finding those papers, I let the sobs come, deep, shaking, messy sobs that made my chest ache. My sister just held me, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe now." The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and quiet grief. The kids were confused, of course they were. I told them we were having a different kind of Christmas this year. We baked cookies, watched Elf, and opened the few gifts I'd managed to grab before we left. They didn't ask where Daddy was right away. But when Sophie finally did, her voice was small. Is Daddy mad at us? I knelt down, my hands trembling as I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. No, sweetheart, I whispered. Daddy just needs time. But we're okay. We're together. It wasn't the full truth, but it was the only truth they needed right then. At night, when the house was quiet, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed everything, the messages, his calm face, the way he'd said, I haven't loved you for a long time. That sentence echoed like a ghost. But as the days passed, something shifted. I realized I hadn't been loved by him in a long time, yes, but that didn't mean I was unlovable. It didn't mean my life ended with his decision. My sister reminded me of that every day. Mary, she'd say, pouring me tea, you've always been the one who held everything together. You can do it again, just this time, for yourself. When New Year's Eve came, I sat by the window while the kids slept. Fireworks bloomed in the distance, reflecting off the snow. Last year, I had kissed a man who was already halfway gone. This year, I kissed my own palm and whispered, you made it. In January, I started looking for a place of my own. I didn't want to go back to the house, too many ghosts lived in those walls. So I found a small rental, a 2-bedroom cottage near the lake. It was old and drafty, but the light poured in through the windows like hope. The first night there, I unpacked slowly, box by box, and when the kids went to bed, I stood in the middle of the living room and finally exhaled. No ornaments. No stockings. No memories I had to tiptoe around. Just space. Just quiet. Just me. Daniel called once in early February. He asked about the kids first, then about logistics, money, schedules, school. Then there was a pause. Are you okay? He asked, his voice low. I looked out the window at the frozen lake, where the sunlight bounced off the ice. Yes, I said simply. I am. He sighed, like he wanted to say more. But I didn't let him. Some stories don't need rewrites. They just need endings. Spring came slowly. The snow melted, the world turned green again, and I began to find myself in small things. Morning walks with coffee in hand. Fresh flowers on the table. Laughter that didn't sound forced. The pain didn't disappear, it softened. It became a memory instead of a wound. One evening, Sophie came to me holding a crayon drawing. It was of a small house, a big tree, and 3 stick figures, me, her, and Liam. Across the top, in uneven letters, she'd written, Our happy home. I cried again, but this time, it was different. By the time the next December rolled around, I didn't feel broken anymore. I still remembered that night, the blinking lights, the divorce papers, the ache in my chest, but I also remembered the morning after. The strength it took to drive away. The courage to start over. That Christmas, I decided to build new traditions. We didn't have a big fancy tree. Instead, the kids and I went to the woods nearby, picked out a small pine, and brought it home. We decorated it with paper stars and cookie ornaments. No matching ribbons, no expensive lights, just love. On Christmas Eve, I lit a single candle and placed it by the window. It wasn't for Daniel. It was for the woman I used to be, the one who believed she couldn't survive without him. I whispered to her, you did. And for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully through the night. By the following spring, the distance between Daniel and me had stretched into something permanent, not just miles, but meaning. We spoke only when it involved the children. His voice was polite, clipped, like he was trying to make our history sound professional. I'd learned not to expect emotion. But I'd also learned not to need it. Then one afternoon, as I was picking Sophie up from her new school, my phone buzzed. It was a message from one of Daniel's old co-workers, Carla, the office manager. Hey Mary. I don't know if it's my place, but I thought you should know. Laura quit. Things got messy. Daniel's been out of the office for weeks. I stared at the screen. For a long time, I didn't reply. I didn't feel the spark of vindictive joy I once imagined I would. Instead, it was something quieter, closure. I texted back. Thank you, Carla. I wish them both peace. And I meant it. A few weeks later, Daniel called. It was late, almost midnight. When I saw his name light up the phone, I hesitated before answering. His voice was rough, uncertain. Mary. I'm sorry to call this late. I wanted to say, you were right. I didn't speak. He continued, Laura and it didn't work. She wanted something else. I thought I did too. But now, he trailed off. I miss the kids. And you. Not the way it was. I just miss what we had. The silence stretched between us like an ocean. Finally, I said, Daniel, I hope someday you find peace with what you've lost. I already have. He didn't argue. I think, deep down, he knew that was the truest thing I'd ever said to him. Over the next few months, I heard bits and pieces, how the affair had gone public, how he'd lost some clients at work, how his parents were disappointed. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind of downfall you see in movies. It was slower, quieter, the kind of unraveling that happens when someone finally sees themselves clearly and can't look away. And honestly, that was enough. I didn't need revenge. Watching him live with his own choices was its own kind of justice. By summer, my life had changed in ways I hadn't expected. I'd started working part-time at a local bakery, the same one I used to visit every Sunday. The smell of cinnamon and fresh bread felt like therapy. The owner, an older woman named June, often said, baking is the art of starting over. You take what's broken, flour, sugar, eggs, and make something whole. I liked that. Some mornings, when the sun poured through the windows, I'd think about how my life had been broken apart, and how, piece by piece, I'd bake something new from it. That fall, Daniel visited the kids. He stood in my doorway holding 2 small gift boxes. His eyes looked tired. Older somehow. Hi, he said softly. I smiled politely. Hi, Daniel. Sophie and Liam came running, hugging his legs. Watching them, I felt something unexpected, not pain, not anger, just a quiet understanding that this was what it had come to. 2 parents. 2 lives. 2 versions of Christmas. And that was okay. Before he left, Daniel lingered by the door. The kids seem really happy here, he said, his eyes scanning the cozy living room, the drawings on the fridge, the smell of cookies cooling on the counter. They are, I said. He nodded. You did good, Mary. It wasn't an apology. But it was acknowledgement, and that was more than I ever thought I'd get. That Christmas, 1 year after I'd found the divorce papers under the lights, I put up the tree again. This time, there was no trembling hand, no hollow chest. Just laughter, the kind that comes from deep within. Sophie hung the star at the top, standing on a chair while Liam held it steady. I stood back and watched them, my heart full. The lights blinked gently, casting a golden glow across the room. And in that glow, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes you don't get the Christmas you plan, but you get the one that sets you free. Later that night, I sat by the tree with a mug of cocoa. Snow fell softly outside, just like that night a year ago. But this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come home. I was already home. I whispered a quiet thank you, to the pain, to the past, to the woman who had once been afraid to start over. And somewhere, deep down, I knew, this was the real gift. You know, when I look back at that night, the night I found the papers under the lights, I realize it wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my truth. Because sometimes, life doesn't tear things apart to punish you. It tears them apart so you can finally see what's real. Back then, I thought I was losing everything: my husband, my family, my stability. But what I didn't see was that life was quietly clearing space. Space for peace. Space for me. For months, I'd replayed that night in my head, wondering if I'd missed the signs, or if I could have saved us. But now, sitting by the tree 1 year later, I understand something deeper. You can't save someone who's already left you emotionally. And you can't keep a life built on someone else's lies. All you can do is stand up, breathe in, and say, I will not let this destroy me. That's what I did. And that's what I want anyone listening tonight to remember. If you're out there right now, watching your world fall apart, maybe it's betrayal, maybe it's loss, I want you to know something. It won't always feel like this. The pain doesn't stay this loud forever. There will come a morning when you'll open your eyes and realize you didn't cry that day. Then another. And slowly, you'll start to feel the sunlight again. I used to think revenge meant getting even. But now I know, sometimes, revenge is just becoming happy again. Smiling without permission. Sleeping peacefully while the person who hurt you lies awake in their own regret. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about taking back the power they stole. And believe me, once you find peace, you'll never trade it for pain again. That night, as the lights from the tree danced across the window, Sophie whispered, Mommy, this Christmas feels different. I smiled. Because it is, sweetheart. She tilted her head. Better? I looked around, at the glowing lights, the warm room, the love that filled the space once heavy with betrayal. Yes, I said softly. Much better. So if you've ever unwrapped heartbreak during the holidays, remember this. The wrapping doesn't matter, the gift is what you learn from it. And sometimes, the best present you'll ever receive is the strength to start again. Merry Christmas, to anyone rebuilding their life one light, one step, one brave breath at a time. Because sometimes, the most powerful story isn't about finding love again, it's about finding yourself.